When their third album, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, was released, it sold 1 million copies in just a month. As always, Duran's videos were a key to their mass appeal. The landmark video for The Wild Boys was an ambitious and expensive foray into the realm of feature filmmaking for the band and director Russell Mulcahy.
Russell had gotten William Burroughs to give him the rights to turn the book of The Wild Boys into a film.
And we'd kind of written this song, and in a quite cheekily, really, sort of pinched the title. So we called him and said, oh, by the way, you know that movie you've got the rights to? We've written a song for it.
I think what he did was produced his fantasy trailer of what he would have made the movie The Wild Boys look like.
And the film never came to fruition, but the video for the song, I think, became his vision of the movie, and it was an absolutely amazing piece of film.
While Duran became Wild Boys offstage, excitement continued to follow the band on tour as their concerts became sold-out teenage screamfests. By '84, their devoted fans had bought 5 million albums, and there were no signs the hysteria would ever die down.
With that much fun going on at the shows, where everybody, there was 20, 30,000 people having that much fun, you couldn't just unplug everything.
We were celebrating really what we'd achieved, and no one was there to stop us. And sometimes it would get way out of hand.
Stories of their private partying soon became a very public property.
The excessive side of it became something that the media started to get their teeth into.
You know, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And it tends to be in that order that people are interested in your group. You know, the music definitely is the last thing they're interested in.
The sheer interest in the human factor, that these boys aren't just all wrapped in cling film, they do have habits, increased record sales and humanized us.
But for John Taylor, the party was getting out of control.
My drug of choice was coke. I was able to be this pin-up guy, you know, 24 hours a day, you know, especially after midnight. You know, it was really useful then.
Even now, I suppose I find it hard to realize how bad that problem had become for him.
The problem had become so bad for John that he entered a rehab program. It would take years for him to maintain sobriety.
I'm quite proud about having been into rehab. I think it's better to be a declared alcoholic, you know, a recovered alcoholic than not.
I mean, there's nobody watching this that hasn't got a skeleton, that hasn't done something, that hasn't had a drink, a line, a joint. But pop music is not worth paying the price for, because that's all it is, pop music.
At the close of 1984, an exhausted Duran Duran took a long overdue, open-ended break.
We'd been on this 5-year roller coaster that hadn't stopped anywhere, and we'd sort of reached the top, and we were able to look back and say, wow, that was something of a ride, but what happened along the way?
With Duran on hiatus, the individual band members sought new avenues of expression.
At the time, I felt Andy was really underused. I said, you know, we're going to do something more aggressive next time, you and I.
John and Andy formed their own band, The Power Station, with chic drummer Tony Thompson and blue-eyed soul singer Robert Palmer.
We went out on a limb to prove to ourselves, and then had this extraordinary feedback of people that we never even thought would get in the same room as us, let alone make a record with us.
In the summer of '85, Simon, Nick, and Roger formed Arcadia and recorded an album with several high-profile guest stars.
Oh, what an amazing time we had, incredible. It was a good lineup, you know, Dave Gilmour, Sting, Grace Jones. I mean, it was an amazing lineup.
Arcadia and Power Station met with critical and commercial success, but created a schism within the band, which would ultimately take many years to resolve. In July of '85, after 1.5 years apart, Duran Duran got back together to support a good cause.
Live Aid was quite something for everyone involved. We signed on very early with Bob Geldof, who'd sort of called Simon and said, will you do it?
Live Aid would prove to be the last performance by the 5 original members of Duran for 18 years. After Live Aid, John and Andy Taylor returned to touring with Power Station.
It was a very odd time for us because we thought we were going to have a 5-piece band back together again. But Roger had actually, he'd had enough of the music business, and he didn't want to come back.
I think he was just exhausted, quite honestly.
People, I think, tried to thrust so much more on him. He wasn't as egotistical as the rest of us, and he felt very shy.
There's only so much attention and so many glaring lights that some people can take. And, you know, you do take on a besieged mentality.
Roger Taylor left the band and withdrew from public life.
He didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore.
And who can blame him? And we know every back door in the world, every hotel, every gig.
Losing Roger was a stunning blow to the band. It was time for Duran Duran to regroup, but Andy Taylor ignored requests to return to the fold.
I think he got tired of being in a band. You know, I think he got tired of towing the party line. I think he just wanted to sing.
And he was doing some solo project in Los Angeles. And I think it was that time when everybody thought they could do whatever they wanted.
It blows your confidence a little bit when people leave. I know when Roger and Andy left, I think the band kind of lost a little bit of its innocence then. And it was never going to be the same.
Duran Duran was falling apart. Next, they parted company with their longtime managers.
I think we were tired, and the pleasure was going out of it.
You're never going to find another band like Duran Duran that could write those songs, that had as much style, that were as good looking. So we thought, probably best not to try.
People say I'm crazy, just
The desire for creative freedom had driven Andy Taylor to embark on a solo career in Los Angeles.
Which is really a bad place to put a young lad from the north of England who's left his super group. And boom, you're in LA. And everyone's like, hey man, we can do this for you.
Andy signed some huge deals.
A record company bidding war over Andy resulted in a multi-million-dollar record deal.
I'd never seen this sort of sums of money. But, you know, carrot. No stick, just carrots.
But when Andy's solo debut, Thunder, was released in November of '86, it was a critical and personal disappointment.
And that was the first time I met the big F word. Failure.
The remaining members of Duran weren't necessarily looking for a new guitarist, but a new guitarist was definitely looking for them.
Okay, Andy's here in LA and the other guys are in England. What should I do? Should I call them?
We kept getting calls from this guitarist, Warren Cucurullo, who we knew of because he was working with Missing Persons and previously worked with Frank Zappa.
Well, Warren basically got in touch with us and said, look, man, you guys need a guitarist because Andy's working with my ex-drummer. They're doing something, and he ain't coming back to you.
Warren's an incredible player, virtuoso, so he was able to step in very quickly, which was a relief. Whew.
John Taylor, Nick Rhodes, Simon Laban, and guitarist Warren Cucurullo entered the studio to record Duran Duran's fifth album, Notorious, with producer Nile Rodgers.
When I showed up to do the album Notorious, and there was no Andy, and there was no Roger, I wasn't quite sure that it would feel like I was working with Duran. But the thing is that the spirit of Duran is sort of bigger than the individual players, you know what I mean? And it felt really like Duran.
We've never been as funky as Notorious and Skin Trade before or since. Nile Rodgers.
Nile's got the funk.
Notorious came out in December of '86. It was a turbulent time. The band members were acting as their own managers and struggling with the daily frustrations of the music business.
A bad time in their career. The peak had been hit and they were coming back down, which is very hard, and they decided to take over their own career. And if they're going to try to do this, then something was going to suffer. And so trying to do it themselves we thought was a mistake.
We always seem to be answering to or talking to people who know more about business than they do about music. Right. And, you know, it's like, we know the business has its place and everything, but it's too damn corporate.
On the following tour, Duran Duran encountered a very different audience than the one they'd left behind 2 years earlier.
Suddenly people were listening to us instead of screaming at us. It was more surprise. It was, you know, walking on stage and not facing this wall of sound.
And though the hysteria of the early '80s had faded, Duran was still adored by their female fans. A fact Simon's wife understands.
I think it's really cool that so many people so many girls, you know, it's been an object of desire for so many young girls. And great, fantastic. You know, if I could see someone was really hitting on him in a big way, you know, someone who just didn't care at all whether he was married or not. I did used to have a few methods. One of them being, you know, I would walk up behind him and just grab him by the balls and just stand there holding them like, see, these, they're mine, okay?
Like noise.
Fans may have been listening more, but they weren't buying like before. From '86 to '92, Duran Duran released 4 albums to dwindling record sales and tour attendance. It seemed impossible that they'd ever rekindle the fire of their glory days.
We spent about a year really writing a lot of songs, and Ordinary World and Come Undone came out of those sessions, and the wedding album was recorded in the living room.
After years of struggle, Duran finally triumphed with the release of the wedding album in 1993.
I mean, it was fantastic. You know, it was the biggest success we'd ever had.
For the first time, we crossed over a generation. People were coming and bringing their kids along.
The wedding album sold millions worldwide and renewed Duran Duran's status as pop stars. The band also scored their first top 10 success in 5 years with their single, Ordinary World.
It took us until Ordinary World, really, to show people what we were about in the 90s.
In September 1995, Simon performed Ordinary World with Luciano Pavarotti at the Great Tenor's Benefit for War Children in Modena, Italy.
And just the fact that me and him were standing on the same stage together, for me, was a mega moment. And for my mum, I mean, out of this world.
In 1994, Duran followed up the success of the wedding album with a record of cover songs entitled Thank You, featuring tracks written by such varied artists as Public Enemy and Lou Reed.
Such a perfect day, you just keep me hanging on.
I think Duran Duran's version of Perfect Day is possibly the best re-recording of a song of mine. I'm not sure that I sing as well as Simon sang it. I think he sings it better than I. If I could have sung it the way he did, I would have. It wasn't for lack of trying. They recorded it the way I meant it, which is a real big thrill for me. So thank you, Duran Duran.
But by the time the band finally finished recording their 11th album 2 years later, Duran had lost their newfound momentum.
Duran Duran suffers from this, never really capitalizing on momentum.
It's really disappointing for us, but I think it kind of kicked us out of a little bit of ambivalence.
Then Duran faced another disappointment. In 1997, as their album Medazzaland neared completion, founding member John Taylor quit the band.
I'd wanted to get out for a long time, actually. For me, it had run its course. You know, after making so many huge corporate albums, where so many people's agendas have to be satisfied, it was kind of fun just to do something for myself.
John, who is now living in Venice, California, opened his own recording studio and began a solo career. He also toured with his own band, Terroristin.
I'll miss him. I really do. I'll have him back tomorrow.
As the millennium approached, Duran Duran found themselves down to just 2 original members.
When John decided to leave the band during the Medazzaland sessions, we really lost a lot.
I felt that we'd kind of come to the end of the road with that lineup.
Duran's